Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Dividock. I'm the supervisor for the Planning, Zoning, and Land Use Unit here in Oakland County. Welcome to today's virtual planners gathering, Brownfields into Greenfields, where we'll discuss the counties and states' brownfield programs. Just a few reminders before we get started. The meeting is being recorded, and and it'll be available on our website. If you have any questions, please use the chat function in Zoom and direct your questions to Jim Schaefer. Jim will moderate a question and answer session after the presentations. So let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Brad Hansen, Senior Business Development Representative, and Brad also coordinates the Brownfield program here at the county. We also have Michelle Bakun, Brownfield Coordinator at Eagle, and we have Dominic Romano, who's the Community Development Director or Manager for MEDC. Thank you all for joining us today. Brad, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I apologize in advance if I have some glitchiness. I'm on my cell phone. Got stranded down in Florida thanks to Delta. So hopefully my cell phone holds up. But I'll jump right into it. First of all, Brad Hansen, Oakland County for 20 plus years, on the Brownfield program for the same amount of time. So I've been here for a long time doing this. Love it. Every project's different, and that's what makes the Brownfield program great. The enabling legislation for the Brownfield program is Public Act 381 of 1996. That's on the next slide, Ryan, please. It basically that authorizes municipalities to create the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. That's for local municipalities as well as county municipalities. Obviously, with Oakland County, we encompass all the cities, villages, and townships within Oakland County. So for those communities that do not have a BRA, they're able to utilize the Oakland County's BRA to get a project passed. But even those projects or those communities that do have an established BRA can ask for help from the OCBRA to pass a project. Example is Ferndale has established BRA, but there was a project that encompassed both the city of Ferndale and Pleasant Ridge. So it's much easier to do a one Brownfield plan through Oakland County versus going to two different municipalities and getting a Brownfield plan passed for the same project. The Public Act 381 promotes the revitalization, redevelopment, and reuse of eligible properties, and those eligible properties are listed here. Those are facilities, which is contaminated property, functionally obsolete, blighted, historic resource. The new one as of late last year, early this year, housing property or housing TIF through MISHDA, and a property under control of the land bank. It allows developers to get reimbursed for pre-approved eligible activities using tax increment financing or TIF. And you'll find the link here on the PowerPoint slide will take you to Public Act 381 if you want to do a full read of the act. Next slide, Ryan, please. So why establish a BRA? Address adverse environmental conditions on the property, promote economic growth, create jobs, clean up land that is underutilized or vacant, which in the result will help increase taxable base for not only that property, but the surrounding area. Then also with the new housing TIF program through MISHDA, it will help create obtainable housing in your community. A little bit about Oakland County's BRA. We were established in 2001. We're a 7-member board. The board members are appointed by the county executive and then reaffirmed by the Board of Commissioners. We typically meet on a quarterly basis or as needed. Recently, as needed, we'll just put out a poll to see how everybody's available for a quorum. So far, actually, this number needs to be updated. So far, we've approved 26 Brownfield projects over that course of time, or there's 26 active Brownfield projects at this time. Next slide, Ryan, please. How do BRA projects utilize TIF? Well, basically, TIF is a financing program that contributes to economic growth and redevelopment. It dedicates the increase in taxable value resulting from the redevelopment to reimburse the developer for pre-approved eligible activities. It's just a form of financing mechanism really for the developer to get paid back for their eligible activities. The concept of TIF is applied only to the redevelopment of area, and the next slide I'll show you will show you that. But basically, it's different from a DDA or CIA, where it's just parcel specific and not necessarily for a whole corridor or whole planning area. Throughout the duration of Brownfield plan, the original tax base is still captured by the original entities or taxing jurisdictions. So if the tax base is set in 2024, the current taxes that are being paid currently will still be captured by those taxing jurisdictions. It's just the increase in taxable value resulting in the redevelopment that will be captured and be reimbursed to the developer for their pre-approved eligible activities. Next slide, Ryan, please. This is a great little chart that shows you how TIF works. You'll see at the bottom in the green, it says baseline property value. You'll see that remain constant throughout. So that, again, those property taxes will be paid to the taxing jurisdictions that they are currently going to. It's just that yellow or orange section that will be captured by the BRA and reimbursed back to the developer for their eligible activities. Then you'll see once the plan is terminated, the developer is fully reimbursed. All those taxes go to the proper taxing jurisdictions. Next slide, please. And this was the map I was referring to. This is City of Novi's Corridor Improvement Authority in the green. You see how encompassing it is. Then we have a Brownfield project called Sakura Novi in the red. So the TIF will be just eligible for that parcel or parcel specific, not for the whole corridor. We do have some questions regarding that sometimes as far as who is capturing from it, just parcel specific. And I guess an important thing to point out is when you have a project like this example with a Brownfield project within an already established TIFA district, there needs to be an interlocal agreement to allow the Brownfield project to be first claim on the tax increment financing. And once the Brownfield plan is paid off, those tax dollars will go back to the CIA in this case. Next slide, Ryan. Developer incentives. So the incentive is a reimbursement of new taxes generated by the new investment, which I already stated. The amount of the reimbursement is based on the value of eligible activities that are paid as part of the project. So just because they're pre-approved in a Brownfield plan, the developer actually has to do those activities and prove that they paid for them in order to be eligible to be reimbursed. Obviously, the developer must pay for the improvements on site. Property taxes have to be paid each year in order for the developer to get reimbursed. The increased amount is not guaranteed to the developer. As I just stated, there needs to be full development in order for the developer to get back as much as possible or to the full amount. And incentive is only realized if the redevelopment investment achieves the anticipated increased property value. That's important to point out. So that's where it's important to get the project fully finished in a timely manner in order to fully get paid back as far as the eligible activities for the developer. So the amount of taxes being reimbursed to the developer by the BRA cannot exceed the costs identified in the Brownfield. Okay. So the incentive amount is up to maximum. The maximum can only be achieved by property value raises quick enough based on the development. So basically, through the OCBRA, we utilize our equalization department very heavily. Stacy, that's Corn at Oakland County Equalization, is somebody I would put you in touch with, who will be able to help you identify the actual taxable value of your redevelopment to help fully establish what those tip tables would look like, or at least get them as accurate as possible with the data we do have. Next slide. Eligible property, I won't get too much into it as the definitions are here, but basically facility is contaminated. You have functionally obsolete, blighted, a historic resource. Housing is the new one, obviously I've said before, but basically it's a property of which one or more units of residential housing are proposed to be constructed or rehabbed or otherwise used for a dwelling and or mixed use. You'll see a link there. The link is to Mishta. They have a pretty comprehensive site listing there's questions and answers. There's a full explanation of the program. There's a couple of sessions that they recorded with PowerPoint slides that go over the questions. I don't want to get too deep into it as it's a new program. I'm still learning nuances myself. But that's a great link for you to get more information on the housing TIF. And land bank properties, Oakland County, as of a couple years ago, has established our own Oakland County land bank run through the Oakland County Treasurer's Department. So there's any property that's controlled underneath the land bank is eligible for brownfield incentives. Eligible activities for reimbursement. So here's the activities that developers are eligible to be reimbursed for in the brownfield plan for eligible activities. The first is the Eagle specific cleanup activities, which I'm sure Michelle will go into. Relocation of public buildings, reasonable cost for environmental insurance, for a brownfield plan, demolition of structures, lead, asbestos, and mold abatement. For eligible properties located in a qualified local unit government, all the above, plus infrastructure improvements and site prep, that is not response activity. For eligible properties in a land bank, all the above, plus assistance with land bank fast track authority, clearing title. Then for the last one, the housing TIF, all eligible activities, if it's fully a facility, qualified rehab costs and financing gap associated with development of housing price for income qualified households, which is 120% AMI. Next slide, please. This is a pretty detailed slide, but basically it just shows our process here at Oakland County. The main thing you want to keep in mind is just if you have a project, get in touch with me. First of all, and I think we have my information we can share as far as contact information, but that's the first step. And I'll do a good job as far as shepherding the project through. We do need two resolutions for our local units of government. One releasing the project to our Oakland County BRA, and the second one will be a concurrent resolution approving the provisions of the Brownfield plan. So we need those two resolutions from the city council or township board in order to move forward. But basically we go through our OCBRA and our board of commissioners and their subcommittee. We hold a public hearing. And at that point, if it gets approved by those entities, the Brownfield plan is eligible for local only TIF capture. But if it's going for state school taxes, it goes to Eagle for environmental issues, MEDC for non-environmental issues. And one bullet point I didn't add so far on this slide was the Mishta for housing activities. So you can read through that. Any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to call me or send me an email to go over how a project is approved in Oakland County.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Michelle Bakun, and I am the Brownfield coordinator for Eagle in the remediation and redevelopment division. And I handle all of Oakland County is the area that I handle, as well as St. Clair and Macomb counties. So I'm just going to go over our programs a little bit, talking about what's Brownfield, how to partner with us, what we pay for, and just a little overview of what we can do and what type of projects we can help fund. So For Eagle activities, a brownfield is a piece of property that is known to be contaminated, and it meets the definition of what we call a facility under Part 201 of Act 451, or it is suspected to be contaminated based on its prior use. Brad touched on the definitions under MEDC and MISTA as well, and I'll let Dominic talk more to the MEDC's portion of that. And to partner with us, I mean, that's really what we like to think of ourselves as a partner. As a Brownfield coordinator, my role is to work with the local units of government. We work with Oakland County. Brad and I work together all the time. We work with our interagency partners as well, MEDC and MISTA. Any type of outreach, educating people about our programs, and actually overseeing the program, the projects that we work on as well. And this actually just is a map of the whole state, and which coordinators work in which areas. So when you partner with us, the team really consists of myself. We always have a district project, Eagle district project manager, who works on a lot of the technical aspects of the program. The local unit of government, whether it's Oakland County or whatever municipality you're working with, needs to be all in, right, on it whenever projects we support. We work directly with Brownfield redevelopment authorities as well, within the local units of government, developers, consultants. We work with our partners at the MEDC on projects, and also MISTA. We do have some new staff on board within our Eagle unit that works solely on MISTA projects. So that's been a real help in getting some of our MISTA projects off and running. So for eligible activities, what types of things does Eagle pay for? And this goes for all of our incentive programs, right? The things that we can pay for. So we can pay for like pre-demolition, hazardous materials, asbestos, mold, lead surveys. We do site assessments, both phase 1 and phase 2. We can provide baseline environmental assessments, due care investigation, reporting, planning. We can pay for the actual due care activities themselves, as well as response activities. So response activities is sort of over and above what a due care activity would be. A due care activity is what a property owner or developer needs to do to make the property safe for the intended reuse. Response activities would sort of put that over and above a due care, what's required for due care. We can also do UST removal and closures, dust control, industrial cleaning, sheeting and shoring in some instances. We can also cover administrative costs for the local unit of government that is sponsoring the project. And under tax increment financing under Act 381, we can also cover environmental insurance and TIF only. We do have a 50-50 rule for demolition and asbestos abatement, where we can only pay up to half of the total environmental cost on the project. So what makes a good redevelopment project with Eagle and Eagle's brownfield incentives? Well, like I mentioned, the first thing is that the property has to be contaminated or suspected to be contaminated. It needs to have development interest or potential interest. And one of the most important, well, as long as being number one, being contaminated, would be that the local unit of government in the community is on board with the project. We always recommend, if you have a project, you talk to the locals first, or in conjunction with us having the locals involved, because we only support projects that a local unit of government would support. So it's always really important to have Oakland County or your municipality on board with the project. before you bring it to us, or bring it to us with them included. So what are our incentive programs? So we have 4 different programs that we work with. We have our Brownfield site assessment program, we have grants, we have loans, and then we also support Brownfield tax increment financing for environmental projects. So our Brownfield site assessment program has really kicked off over the last couple of years, and it's a great program. It's totally free, and it's expanded. Originally, it was mostly local units of government that it could apply, but now local units of government, nonprofits, developers, prospective property purchasers, property owners, and we can do work on both publicly and privately owned sites. The things that we pay for under this program are asbestos and hazardous material survey, phase 1, phase 2s, BEAs, and we can create a plan for complying with due care. One of the keys with this program is that Eagle actually contracts with consultants and subcontractors to actually do the work. So Eagle has the work performed for the applicant, and then we provide the information to them. It's not a cash or reimbursement program. It's work that we actually go out and do. Oh, and it's free. So for our grant and loan projects, Part 196 of Act 451 is where how we're funded with grants and loans. We can provide up to a $1 million grant and a $1 million loan per local unit of government on one project per fiscal year. So a project could get a $1 million loan and a $1 million grant, or you could have just a $1 million grant or just a loan, and it doesn't have to be up to the total amount either. The eligible applicant in this case is the local unit of government. That could be Oakland County, it could be the Oakland County Brownfield Authority, it could be whatever municipality, right, is working on the project. We currently have a couple grant projects going on, at least a couple in Oakland County, actually more than that now that I think about it. We have one that in Pontiac that Oakland County was an applicant for. It's a few years in now, and we also have a new one coming up in the city of Rochester that Oakland County also supported. So the key for grants is that there has to be a secure development project, right? The developer has to be on board, there needs to be financing, all of those types of things. And the economic benefit on the property has to be greater than the total grant amount, right? So if you have a project that is only going to have maybe you know, $500,000 investment, we could not provide a $1 million loan. We could only do 500,000. And the property has to be a facility. Loans, we like to say, like Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. So loans, there doesn't necessarily have to be a committed developer on the project, right? It could be more speculative, like a spec building, or just development potential in general. So our loans also are issued to the local unit of government, not an individual. It's a 15-year loan term with no payments and no interest for the first 5 years, and then interest at 1.5% after that. Loans are great for projects if there may be a liable party that is responsible for causing the release involved with the project, or if there's cash flow, it flows really well with TIF. So if you have a project where you're going to be using tax increment financing, but the developer may not have the ability to pay the upfront cost, we can issue a loan. The loan we can provide to the local unit of government upfront. for the work. So that kind of goes really well. And then when TIF starts to be captured, the loan payments start. So the timing typically works really well for loans and TIF together. So Brad went over this quite a bit, so we won't go into, I won't go into it too much. But again, this is local units of government can support developers with TIF. For Eagle, a project needs to be in a brownfield plan, right? An Act 31 brownfield plan for TIF. It has to be an eligible property. We need to know what the costs are, and then what the tax increment revenue will be. Once that's done, that's complete. We have an Act 31 work plan, which is the meat and bones for Eagle. It goes through all the details of the activities, the costs, and it allows for the capture of both state and school tax capture, 24 mills total. We don't allow the capture of debt millages, and it has to be approved. The work plan has to be approved by Eagle, the MEDC, and or MISTA before any work can be conducted. So sort of takeaways, right, on our programs, right? Brownfield projects, they exist everywhere in any community, any community that you may be involved with, whether it be the corner gas station, a factory. We see old housing projects, right, that may have lead paint or demolition debris, landfills. They're all around, right? And we work on all aspects of them. And we really want to encourage people, to utilize our resources, our funding, our expertise, right? Because we want to see these projects happen, and we really don't want them to die just because of a lack of funding for these environmental activities, right? And another thing is reach out early, right? And often I'm happy to answer any questions, calls, emails, and contact us, very early in the process, and we can help you walk through whatever questions or anything that you have about our programs or Eagle programs in general. We tend to be a good source of information to get you to the right person in Eagle if you have other related questions. So this is my information. This will be in the chat. The resource links will also be in the chat. Oops. So I'll get that up for you, and look forward to any questions that you may have at the end of the talk.
All right, there we go. Hello, thank you so much, appreciate it. And thanks to Brad and Michelle. I think they covered quite a bit, considering we all kind of work in very similar space. I'm Dominic Romano. I'm the Senior Community Development Manager for the MEDC in Southeast Michigan, working primarily in Wayne, Macomb, and Oakland counties. So you're going to see some slides here. I tried to, maybe whittle this down because I imagined that Brad and Michelle would probably go over a number of things. So I'm gonna just kind of briefly go over a few things myself. It's out of the same act. Over time, we work very closely with our local BRAs, county BRAs, and our partners like Eagle and MISTA. In fact, I have to applaud, the staff, the program staff at Eagle and the MEDC, not to pat myself on the back, it's mostly my partners in the building, for helping to stand up the MISTA program. So I think there's a really good partnership, state level, working through these things. So our governing body is the Michigan Strategic Fund Board. They make the decisions. They're the ones that approve projects, and we bring these projects to them. in various forms for various things, be it, tourism related or promotional for the state, a business development or a large company are attracting, a global corporation to Michigan, or a local project, like something that would use a brownfield TIF, transformational brownfield, that sort of thing. But we base that on objectives, goals and objectives. We have been looking at downtowns and traditional corridors, high impact commercial corridors in Michigan for many years, and use brownfield incentives to help facilitate that and to support developers and property owners in conjunction with those local BRAs, to make sure that these are effective, efficient use of infrastructure that already exists, so that we can cost save, not just for ourselves, but for those locals who will in time have to maintain those infrastructure systems, reducing blight, supporting mixed income, inclusive developments, and to preserve, quite honestly, because a number of brownfield sites already exists within our communities, we want to preserve those natural places, open spaces, keep agriculture vibrant within the state, and this is the way we can do it. Throughout the years, we've been able to work throughout the area in Southeast Michigan. Quite notably, some projects you might want to look up. Northland City Center Mall redevelopment is a key project. I think Brad mentioned Ferndale earlier. Another project there was the development on Troy, where they were able to erect a parking structure with commercial integrated into that space. A couple of other ones in Detroit, next to the Ford Piquette Museum, is 411 Piquette, former showroom for automotive, and basically they were storing documents there. Ford had owned it for a while. Now they're developing apartment buildings and some commercial there, using that. In Berkeley, there's the Ivy Lofts and Clausonian Apartments. I think that may have been mentioned earlier. And then on the business development side, I primarily work with community developments, looking at mixed use, mixed income projects in those downtowns and that sort of thing. But on the business development side, we have utilized Brownfield TIF to support business development or business related projects, particularly, North Point is a name you've probably heard on the news many times, has been able to develop a number of logistics facilities within Southeast Michigan. Redeveloping Eastland Mall is one that's underway now. There is a facility in Warren that also North Point has been able to utilize. So we've kind of already been through a little bit of this as far as, what's an eligible property. We look at these things. This is part of the law. It actually spills into some other incentives that we use to identify, because these are going to be your more challenged properties. They come at a higher cost. If you're just looking at a blank field to build new construction on, it's likely going to be more or less expensive than something that has these kind of qualities to them. And we look to our local partners and whatever entities, either a building inspector or an assessor of a third or fourth level assessor, to make classifications, for functional obsolescence or a blighted property. Facility, projects, we'll work in, like Michelle said, work in conjunction with Eagle, making sure that we're covering all bases and all possible sources, because our support is definitely going to be needs-based. In that case, needs to be made And when we have our experts and our agency partners and our local partners all coming together to look at these projects, it's important to identify those so that all possible sources and all possible support can be considered for a project. So I'm not going to go over these. There are other categories, but like my colleagues have said, it's always great to reach out early to have the conversation to see what other ways or what other means we can be helpful in order to support projects. For the Michigan Strategic Fund Board to approve properties for non-environmental brownfield conditions. A lot of people kind of get hung up on this. When you think about Eagle, like Michelle said, you're looking at those facility properties, something, a contaminant of some sort that needs to be addressed in some form or fashion. In the case of the MSF, we're looking at particularly demolition. That could be the whole place. It could be parking infrastructure. It could be one building as opposed to the one right next to it, even though they might be in the same project. Or it could be spot demo. Something within the building, just the innards of the building, that sort of thing. Of course, the remediation of lead, asbestos, and mold to make that property safer for those being used. And then, of course, for any qualified local governmental units, which is defined by the law, and I believe it's Act 146, which I think was the activating legislation for Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act, or otherwise known as OPRA. Identified approximately 146, 147 communities in Michigan, which are eligible for site preparation and public infrastructure costs. We think about site preparation, we're looking at things like dewatering of land, making slope adjustments to the ground because of, it's not feasible for redevelopment. It could be that the fill material within the ground is not suitable for a larger structure, those sorts of things. And then public infrastructure can include right-of-way improvements, alleyway needs, structured, integrated, or underground parking, if that's something that's needed and supported locally. It could also include, sewer and water hookups or nearby sewer or water infrastructure, pavement needs related to that property or that project, and those sorts of things. So there are a number of resources that we have that I would ask people to explore. We have a pretty extensive list of things on our website at myplace.org/programs. And at the top of the page, you're going to see tools listed. So you can get to it either way. You can go directly through that link that I just provided, or you can go to the main website, the myplace.org. And get to the tools button at the top, which will get you to all the tools that we use for technical assistance and for incentives. Having these presentations, and we rely on our agency partners. If we have questions about projects and where someone might want to be involved. So it's always important to use those resources at Eagle and MISTA and the BRA to answer questions that you may have. A lot of projects will utilize consultants. They could be environmental firms. They can be individuals. Sometimes they're attorneys who have just had a great exposure to the legislation or the process. They can be very helpful in knowing the ins and outs. Our and are familiar with the resources that we use. You know, we have at the bottom of the page of the Brownfield TIF tax increment financing program on our website, there are just a vast amount of resources, including, you know, instructions on how to create a Brownfield plan or work plan. I would encourage persons to do that, because it's, you know, there is a lot that goes into these work plans, and it'll give you kind of a step-by-step or category a section of how that plan should be formatted and what's needed there. It is really important because in a lot of cases, projects that are utilizing these tools also will be utilizing other incentives, not just ours, but other agency incentives, and you know, all the resources and help that you can get is out there to be helpful to you, and we can always help with that as well, and how to navigate that. Our staff that we have at the MEDC, program staff, and our underwriters are also very helpful. Typically, the community development managers or business development managers are your first kind of step into the door. And if you don't know who your business development manager is or community development manager is, you can reach out to me. You can look at our website. There's a map. I'm going to kind of show that in a second, of where to start, and it has contact information if you select the proper region. I would say that's very important. We can give you that early guidance. That's really helpful to you going through this process. I would be remiss in not mentioning first the transformational brownfield program. It is a subset or a portion of the law that was added on later that opens up additional sources for tax increment revenue, and opens up eligible costs to do a much grander, larger scoped project that has a large impact, not just to your community, not just to the region or the county, but to the state. And so over the years, you may have heard of particular projects. The one pictured here, of course, is the Bedrock project in downtown Detroit. You know, it is highly recommended that before considering this tool, that you consult with your local partners and you consult our website for Transformational Brownfield to see where the program balance is. It is getting to where we're reaching the statutory limit on what tax sources can be utilized to support projects of this scale and scope. So I would, you know, I can answer questions you might have this time, but I would just encourage you to take a look at that website first of all. Like I said, you know, we have a map on the website. I've got the website here, myplace.org. So if you're not in a place that falls within Region 10, you can get contact information by clicking on this map. Here's my contact information. And I believe that is it for me. So thank you so much. I do appreciate the time today. I guess I'll move it back to Ryan.
Thank you, Dominic.
You're welcome.
So yes, now we're going to open up the question and answer session. So Jim, let us know if you have any questions and that have come in. Thanks.
Yep. First question, if the developing entity is a DDA, what are the resources for abatement? In this case, the BEA has outlined the contamination and resources needed for cleanup according to a public-private development plan. So the question is, can a DDA be the developer?
Yes. Yep. That's not, we don't have any issues with that at Eagle.
Okay. Brad, Dominic, anything to add?
I would say that, yes, we've had instances where the DDA has been the developer on a project, and we'd have to just evaluate what that looks like. Typically for Brownfield TIF, it's still going to be either local BRA kind of governing that, or the county, like Brad, coming in on that. But with other incentives that we have, we DDAs, according to the law, can be the developer, and we would work with them on what that looks like case by case.
Okay, so in this instance, they should reach out to Brad. This is an Oakland County community.
Yeah, it's just,
Go ahead,
yeah.
Brett.
Either or. I mean, yeah, either or. You can reach out to any three of us, really. But yeah, I mean, Oakland County, feel free to reach out to me, and then if we need to loop Dominic or Michelle in, we can do that.
I would just say, as a general statement, our requirement is that we try to find out every source that's possible, any agency that should be involved, and we all need to be on the same page. So we're going to try to facilitate a conversation that's going to involve everybody that's relevant to the conversation, and so if you reach out to any individual here, just know that we're going to be looking at each other later on. So
okay. All right. This is more of a comment. This came in during your presentation, Dominic.
Okay.
Land bank properties are also eligible for site prep and infrastructure.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that's like a newer aspect of the law where that becomes more of an easier, or not say easier, but also a path to eligibility. Again, that's we're kind of navigating some things more on a case by case, and I would most certainly get program staff involved early on conversations in that regard. But yes.
Okay. Can either or any of the presenters touch upon the issue of known, viable, or liable parties?
Well, that really comes to play under Eagle, right, with grants and loans, because under our cleanup statute, viable liable parties are responsible, right, for the activities that need to be done based on a release that they cause. Now, that said, one, under our loan program, we're not as concerned with the liable parties because we get our money back, right? So there can be liable parties under our loan program. Under our grant program, if there is a viable liable party, we can only pay, we can support the project, but we can only pay for due care activities, right? So what the activities are that are required to make the property safe, right, for reuse. So if you had, for example, an old factory that has all kinds of contamination, groundwater, soil, everything's contaminated, but there's going to be an apartment complex or something put on them. We could do things like vapor mitigation or some limited soil removal. There are things that we can do under the grant program when there is a liable party. The liable party can't be involved or cannot be the developer under the grant program, but if they exist, we can pay for like I said, due care activities under that program. And under TIF, it's fairly easy to get a TIF project done as well, as long as the local unit of government is not the liable party, which has happened before.
Okay. Dominic, Brad, anything to add? Okay. The only other question that I see was, can we get copies of today's presentation? And they will be available probably in a day or two. And I've put the recording link in the chat for everyone to copy if they wish. And then real quick, if anyone had any other questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. All right, Ryan, I'm not seeing any, so
Okay.
get away.
Yeah, so I'd just like to thank Brad, Michelle, and Dominic for joining us today and providing their experiences and expertise. I also want to thank everyone for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you at our next planners gathering on August 20th, where we'll touch on tiny homes in a big city. So I hope you have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.